Hey everybody, welcome to part 3, season 3 of My Favorite Martian, Mistakes, Goofs, and Oddities. So now season 3, we get to see everything in color. It's good to see color finally come to the show. The animation for the intro here is still the same, but it's nice that we can see what it looks like in color. Another big change for the show is that season 1 and season 2 were actually filmed at the Desilu Studios, and then season 3 they moved to MGM. I'm not really sure what the reason was for it, but it was actually a good thing because they had a bigger budget and more resources. And you can tell because it just seems like there's more quality in the episode. So it was definitely a good thing. All right, well, let's get started with season 3. Now, the very first episode is called Go West, Young Martian. Part 1, it was actually a two-part story right off the bat. Now, because they moved to MGM Studios, they had to recreate all the sets. It's insane, but they were able to do it. They recreated Uncle Martin and Tim's apartment here and the whole exterior set. Another thing I kind of noticed here is this big cloth painting or whatever. They used to have a window there, and I always thought in season 1 and 2 it was really strange they had a window right against that wall, which was kind of like an outdoor window where you can slide it open. Why in the world would you have a window that slides open like that between the bedroom and the living room here? Maybe it's because Mrs. Brown added an extension or something to the loft up above the garage. I don't know, but it looks like they got rid of it by this time. Also in season 3, we're going to end up seeing Lieutenant Brennan in a lot more episodes. Also, season 3 is going to feature a lot of episodes involving the time machine. Now, Uncle Martin and Tim inadvertently get sent back to 1849 because Lieutenant Brannon accidentally hit a button on the time machine. But now, once again here, we can see that Uncle Martin's antennas go up while he's wearing a hat, which makes no sense because he doesn't have any holes in his hat for the antennas to come out. And also, with that large brim around the hat right here, there's no way that those could come out like that. When Uncle Martin appears right here, they forgot to add in the sound effects for his antennas and when he appears. And it's almost like they didn't cut it long enough. You could actually barely see his antennas going back down in his head. Now, I have to give credit to the commentary that was provided during this episode with two people that worked on the show. Now, as Uncle Martin and Tim walk away here, watch the reflection in this window behind Uncle Martin, and I'll try to pause it right here. Now, okay, if you look in here, you will see in this reflection, you'll see one of the crew members, and he's carrying a clapperboard right there. And he was hanging over the rail. It was really quick. Okay, so I'll do it again here in slow motion. Right there, you can see him. There's the clapperboard right here. And he hangs his arm over the rail. It's actually really cool that you can actually see that. Now, while these two are talking, if you look over at this window right over here, you will see that there is a gentleman with a baseball-style hat right there. Now, I don't think those were in fashion back in 1849. So definitely another crew member that's kind of hanging out there while they're shooting this scene. It's very cool that you can see that as well. When Uncle Martin levitates these pies, look up in this darker area right in here and you'll see the wires that are operating those. It's very quick. Also, when the pies fly by Uncle Martin and Tim here, watch the shadow on this wall. You'll see the shadow of the pole that's suspending the pies. Right there, you can see the pole right there. Pamela Britton plays Mrs. Brown's great-great-grandmother in this episode, but of course, it's Pamela Britton. But now I can't play the music in this scene because I'm not sure if it's copyrighted, but this is actually Pamela Britton actually singing in this scene. She was an accomplished singer and dancer, and she gets to show off more of her talents right here, which I think is really cool. Later on, when Tim and Uncle Martin are tied up, you'll notice that Uncle Martin's fingers are all tied up, so he can't use his levitating finger to untie them, and he makes a really cool reference to the TV show Bewitched. He's going to use his nose to untie the ropes instead of his finger right here.
I wonder if it would work. What? My nose. I saw it done on your television once. Well, it's worth a try. Here, aim your ropes at my nose.
At your nose?
Yes, aim your ropes at my nose. Do it.
That's great. So obviously, Bewitched was on the same network or the same studio or something like that. It's really cool that they referred to Bewitched. I mean, they didn't actually say Bewitched, but he just was referring to it. I think. Skipping ahead now to the episode titled Keep Me from the Church on Time. Now, in this episode, we have a guest star appearance from Yvonne Craig, better known as Batgirl from the Batman TV series. Later on, when Uncle Martin is levitating her costume out of this case, if you look on the wall right here very briefly, when the costume goes back in the case, you will see a shadow right in this area of the pole that is supporting the wires that's holding up the costume right there. It was very brief. And you can actually see the wires just a little bit on there, but unfortunately, for whatever reason on the DVD, this episode was not rendered very clearly. There's kind of a strange piece of the set back here. This little thing, it almost looks like it's supposed to be like a cornice or something that goes up to the ceiling, but it's just got all this blank space above it. Now, I don't know if that was not supposed to be seen and the camera pulled away too far or what, but it's kind of odd. Maybe it's supposed to be a shelf, but it's just kind of a weird piece of the set. So I just noticed in this scene, now all of a sudden we have this beam going across the roof or the ceiling. Now that's very interesting. They didn't have that beam there just a minute ago, and now all of a sudden they do. Very strange. I wonder why they decided to not have that there. In this scene, if you look right up here, very briefly, you can see the boom microphone hanging down. Moves around just for a little few seconds right there. This episode is titled, I'd Rather Fight Than Switch. Now, during this entire scene, if you look right here, you can see the shadow of the boom microphone moving back there. So it's either the boom microphone or the pole that holds it up. You can see it alternating around between Mrs. Brown and Uncle Martin right there. But it's pretty visible. It's kind of cool. You can see it. Later on, Uncle Martin levitates the ring back to Detective Brennan's pocket. Now, if you look right up here, you can very clearly see the thread that's holding it up. This episode is called Tim the Mastermind. Now, when Uncle Martin levitates these grocery bags right here, watch right up in this area. You'll see the reflection of the wires right up there. Right there, you can really see one right in here. Trying to pause it. They're pretty obvious. Looks like more fishing line was used. Once again, we see Uncle Martin's antennas that can raise even though he's wearing a hat, which doesn't make any sense because the brim of the hat would be in the way right here. And he doesn't have holes in the hat for the antennas to come out. As Uncle Martin comes around this corner, you'll notice that there's a shadow right here of the extra that's going to walk by, but you can see he's just kind of waiting for his cue to walk over across the camera here. And there he goes. But you can see he was waiting for his moment. In this scene, Uncle Martin kind of walks towards the camera, but you can see that there's a little bit of a delay in the person who runs the antennas. They're probably having to hurry up and get them ready right here. So you can see that Ray Walston has to stand here for a little while, which is kind of an odd bit of silence. And then finally, his antennas go up. When Uncle Martin appears right here, now notice the shadow right here. You'll notice that there's the device for the antennas right there. You can just quickly see it go down. So here's a close-up. Now, once again, watch right back here. You'll see how it just quickly drops right there? It's really cool. Once again, I really wish I could see what that device looks like. Also, what's interesting in this scene is when he does appear, watch this crepe paper or these pieces of paper from the computer. You'll notice they start to move around. Right there. So that's the guy that's running the antennas. He's actually trying to get out of the way, but you can actually see him move around, or you can at least see the paper move when he gets out of the way. In this episode, titled Martin Goldfinger, throughout this entire scene, you can see this wire kind of hanging right here. It's reflecting in the light. Now that light, or the wire, is actually connected to the piece of paper down there, because Martin lifts it up right there. Just for that short scene, they put a wire on the piece of paper. This episode is called Bottled Martian. So for the first time, we actually get to see the bathroom in this apartment. We've never seen it before in the first or second season, and we only get a glimpse of it here in the shower, so it's obviously located right next to the bedroom, but we never knew that until now. Later on in the episode, Uncle Martin is mistaken as a genie, and he disappears right here. Now, watch his antennas. They come way up here. Now, this, his antennas are always a kind of I don't know, a kind of a strange thing on this show because now, in order to show the audience that he can disappear still with his antennas are way up here. Now, we have never seen Uncle Martin's antennas go all the way up to this point. I mean, look how tall that would be. So it's kind of exaggerated here, and it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, his antennas go way up there. Okay, so now in this later scene, there's a couple of goof ups right here. If you look, you can see Uncle Martin's antenna is already up. So it's just waiting for the time to go up, and you can clearly see that they're already up. But now what's really weird is this is really cool. Normally, we only see this much of the antennas, the silver part of it. But because they had to go up so high, and because they had this feather on his turban so far over, you can actually see a part of the antenna that you're not supposed to see. This is like a thin metal piece right here. We never see that part of the antenna. That's always behind Ray Walston's head. So it's very unusual that they allowed this to slip by. I guess they just didn't want to do another take of it. But you can see the entire antenna here. It's really cool that you can see the whole thing. And another interesting thing about this scene is if you look right up here, you will briefly see the boom microphone right here. Now keep an eye on that little spot. There it is. They got the microphone just a little too low right there. This episode is called Girl in the Flying Machine. Now at the beginning of the episode, Tim walks over to the right side of the screen here, but if you watch up here, there's a quick little shadow of the boom microphone. Right there, it's very quick. So here in slow motion, you can see it right here. As it goes across, you can actually see the whole microphone. It's kind of cool. Looks like there's even a wire on there. Once again, Bernie Coppell appears in this episode as a guest star as Mrs. Brown's nephew George, best known for being in The Love Boat. Also guest starring in this episode is Jill Ireland. Jill was in a bunch of TV shows and movies. She later went on to marry Charles Bronson and sadly had a very short life. She passed away of breast cancer at the age of 54. Interestingly enough, when she passed away, she was cremated and her ashes were placed in a cane, which was also buried with Charles Bronson when he died. I thought that was pretty interesting. This episode is called That Time Machine is Waking Up That Old Gang of Mine. Pretty crazy title. Now, this is interesting. Uncle Martin is going to appear over here on the right, next to Bill Bixby over here. Now, when he does, listen carefully. You'll actually be able to hear the little motors that operate Uncle Martin's antennas. Usually you never hear that. They probably edit it out. But for some reason, you can actually hear it. It sounds like a little whirring sound. So here we go. You can actually hear the whirring sound when they're going down, and as soon as they're down past his head, you can hear the sound quit. This episode is called Avenue C Mob. Now, in a brief guest appearance here, we see Jamie Farr, who would later be known as Klinger from MASH. Later on in this scene, Uncle Martin's going to disappear. Now, once again, watch the side of his neck right here, and you'll see the antennas go up before they actually reach the top of his head.
I'll bet you can't do.
So it's pretty cool. You can see it on the side of his neck. And here I've zoomed in on it, so look again at the side of his neck right there. I'll go slow motion, and you'll actually see those antennas go up right on the side of his neck here. As soon as we get to there it goes. That's pretty cool. You can actually see where the metal part meets the springs on it. This episode is called the O'Hara Caper. Now, as the camera zooms in towards Bill Bixby, watch this little corner right here. You'll see the camera, the shadow of the camera, right there. So you can see it right here. And then they're going to pull back, and you'll see the shadow of the camera pull back as well. Right there. It's pretty cool. When Uncle Martin appears in the jail cell, look over here on this shadow. And once again, when the antennas go down, because you can see the shadow of the antenna right here, you'll see there's actually a line right there. That's the mechanism in behind his head. It kind of goes up here, and then that's where the antenna comes out on both sides. Now watch this part right here, and you'll also see this antenna go down behind his neck. right there. Let's get a close-up of that. Okay, so now looking closer, we can see the line right there of the mechanism in behind. So let's watch the antennas go down and then watch that part. And you'll see the antennas go down behind Ray Walston's head. Right there. This episode is called Who's Got a Secret? So the guest star here is Gavin MacLeod, best known for being on The Mary Tyler Moore Show and The Love Boat. In this scene, we see Uncle Martin's antennas go down. Now he's going to walk over to this corridor right over here and look around the corner. Now when he walks back, you'll notice that Ray Walston walks backward right here, which looks kind of weird. Why would he walk backward? Well, that's because the device that operates his antennas is still behind his back, and of course if he turns his to the side, we're all going to see that. So he has to awkwardly walk backward in that scene. This episode is titled Air Today, Gone Tomorrow. Now, in the first and second season of this show, we never really saw anybody walk out here and go down the stairs. Originally, on the original sets, there was a small little wall right where this curtain is. Now, in the new sets here on MGM, as I mentioned, they moved to MGM Studios in season 3, they made this window a little bit wider, and there's kind of a very narrow area here, so you can kind of see a little bit more of what's going on out here. Now, you're going to see this guy, actually both of these guys are going to walk out here and go down the stairs behind this little rail right here, this little wall. Well, there was no stairs there. Actually, there is no stairs. So they probably told the actors to act like you're going down the stairs, kind of like how pantomime artists can act like they're, walking down the stairs like that. Well, these guys don't do a very good job of it. Now, watch him. He's going to go around this, and as he goes down here, he just bends down. So we can see it right here. Now, keep an eye on him as he goes down. And you can see that he just bends down right there. Now, this guy here, he's going to walk around, and you'll see him over here, and he does the same thing as he's putting his hat on. So right here, so see, he just bends down. So they were supposed to act like they're walking down the stairs, but they didn't do a very good job of pantomiming walking down the stairs. Later on in this scene, Tim walks around this newsstand. Now, watch right in this area. You'll see the shadow of the camera kind of go across right here. Right there. Later on in the scene, Tim kind of peeks around this corner to talk to the newsstand seller, and you can see once again the shadow kind of go across Bill Bixby right here. Right there. When Tim returns back to 1965 with the time machine here, we actually see the inside of the closet that's over by the front door. We have never seen the inside of this closet before, and here he's coming out. Now, that's probably a separate set because I don't think that closet set is actually really behind that door. But it's interesting that we finally get to see what that looks like inside there. This episode is called TV or Not TV. So the guest star in this episode is Conrad Janis, best known for being on the TV show Mork and Mindy as Mindy's father. Later on, Uncle Martin levitates one of the components out of this TV camera, and you can clearly see the wire right here that suspends it. Uncle Martin uses his duplicating machine to make a replica of this component right here. And then he's also going to miniaturize this. He's going to make it smaller. So now, watch up here. I'll do it in slow motion, but you'll actually see the fingers or the hand of the crew person who is, changing them out. So we'll go about slow motion here. So keep your eye on the top of the screen right up there. There it is. So his hand shows up there. It's kind of weird. Later on, Uncle Martin levitates this piece back into the camera. Now watch right in this area, and once again, you'll be able to see the wire. Right there, it's like a little piece of thread. This episode is called Man from Uncle Martin, and once again, Gavin MacLeod makes a guest appearance in this episode as Mrs. Brown's brother. Right at the beginning of the episode, we see this gadget moving around. Now, if you look right over here, you can actually see the gentleman or the crew member who's actually operating this thing. See him down there moving around? You can see a part of his suit or whatever he's wearing. And then as they walk over here, you can still see a part of his suit right there. So he's probably shaking it around and pumping the smoke out of it. And you can also see the shadow of him right over there. And then you can see his foot. His foot was moving right there. Oh man. I guess they didn't notice that he was in the shot. When Uncle Martin uses his Martian powers to make that thing trim the bushes, look up here and you'll see the wires because this thing goes back inside there. And you can see the wires right up here that was levitating that. Later on, Uncle Martin levitates the vacuum part of this device. Now look right in this area. You'll see some very obvious wires right there. I mean, they're pretty visible. There looks like there's two of them, one there and one there, as it comes floating out of there. This episode is titled Martin the Mannequin. Now, in this scene where Tim and Uncle Martin were in the department store, Uncle Martin gets turned into a mannequin because of some fumes from some cologne that Tim was looking at. Now, Mrs. Brown and Detective Brennan just left this scene, but if you look at this mirror in the background, you can actually see the reflection of the floor, and you can see the tape marks on the floor. Those are the marks for the actors to stand so that they're all in their proper places. Now, I must say that the prop people really did a great job making this replica or this mannequin of Ray Walston because it looks just like him. I'm guessing that maybe it's a wax figure. And they also made this amazing replica or mannequin of Mrs. Brown as well. Later on, Tim accidentally breaks the bottle of that cologne in his pocket. You can see that it had leaked all over his pocket right here. And the cologne is the antidote to turn Mrs. Brown back into a human. When Tim goes back to the counter to get another bottle of this cologne, the clerk here, the lady, makes a comment about how, he basically is bathed into this cologne because all she can smell is the cologne all over him. So it doesn't make sense that Mrs. Brown doesn't get turned back into herself because of the fumes coming from Tim's pocket. If the fumes are that strong, it should have turned Mrs. Brown back into her human self. And since Tim reeks of this cologne, wouldn't that turn Uncle Martin back into a mannequin again? This episode is called When a Martian Makes His Violin Cry. Now, the guest star in this episode is Shelley Morrison, best known for playing Sister Sisto in The Flying Nun, and also Rosario on Will and Grace. Once again, we see here that Uncle Martin can raise his antennas even though he's wearing a headpiece, which wouldn't actually work. There's no holes in it for the antennas to stick out, so another mistake they've done many times in many episodes. This episode is called When You Get Back to Mars, Are You Gonna Get It? Now, this episode has a lot of interesting things in it. First of all, it was the last episode of My Favorite Martian, and oddly enough, it was aired way before the end of the series. So there was actually 8 more episodes that aired after this one, but this one actually was the last one filmed. When Andromeda's spaceship flies by, look up in this area and you'll see the wire suspending it. They're pretty obvious. When Tim and Uncle Martin discover Andromeda's ship, Uncle Martin opens the hatch right here. Now, when he does, you'll notice, I'll go slow motion, that there's nobody in the chair right here. See how the chair is empty? And the camera pans up, but you can still see that the seat has nobody in it. But when they show the inside of the ship, we see that Andromeda is actually in there. Now, this episode must have been confusing for people that watched it when it first ran on television, because here it is, they introduce this Andromeda character and he never goes back to Mars, but then in the following 8 episodes, he's nowhere to be seen. So I'm sure people were wondering why that was the case. Wayne Stamm is the actor that played Andromeda in this episode, and he said he had a really good time doing this one episode. It's kind of sad that he only got to do one. He said Bill Bixby was really nice, and Ray Walston was very helpful in some of his acting lessons towards Wayne Stamm. We also discover that Andromeda only has one antenna. Now, on the Season 3 DVDs, there's a very interesting interview with Wayne Stamm, and you get to see what he looks like today. But he was talking about this particular scene coming up right here. Now, Bill Bixby, he really wanted to do this stunt where he jumps over the desk and kind of crashes into the wall. But the producers or director really didn't want him to do it. They just didn't want him to get hurt. But Bill Bixby was pretty insistent upon it, and Wayne Stamm said that it kind of was a bit of a point of contention, but finally Bill Bixby got his way, and you can see what he did here.
Yes. Don't waste your time, Tim. You'll never catch him that way.
So that was actually Bill Bixby that did that stunt. That's pretty cool. Andy is invisible, and he picks up this chair, but you can clearly see the wire right in this area that's suspending it. Right there, you can kind of see it reflected right in that spot right there. Now, when Uncle Martin uses his levitating finger to open this door over here, watch in the little crack of the door right in there as it opens, and you'll be able to see the hand of the person that is actually opening the door behind that wall. So I'll try to catch it. Okay, so right in this crack area, keep an eye over here, and you'll see a hand back there, or a sleeve. See it? It's one of the stage crew guys is the one that actually operated the door. In this scene, when Andromeda turns around, the person who's operating his antenna has got to quickly get in behind him so that he can get the antenna behind Wayne Stamp. So I'll try to do this in slow motion here. Now, I'm sorry this 1/16th is in the way. Watch right down here. You're going to see something move, and I'm going to try to pause it. It looks like it's, I'm guessing it's the shoulder of the guy right there. Now, see how that's raising up right there? So I'm thinking that's the shoulder of the guy that operates the antennas as he goes and sneaks behind Wayne Stam, and then that's when he's got to get that antenna ready, because you'll see the antenna come up behind Wayne Stam's head right there. This episode is interesting because Andromeda, or Andy as they're trying to get him accustomed to being called, doesn't like the fact that Uncle Martin and Tim want to hide the fact that Uncle Martin's a Martian and that Andy's a Martian. He wants to let people know who they are, but he doesn't understand that Earthlings really aren't quite ready to understand that there is such a thing as a Martian. So when he goes to school right here, he comes in his flight suit, and also all the kids are laughing at him when he's trying to say he's a Martian. So right here, he proves that he's got powers, and he'll levitate this book across the classroom right here. So the teacher's shocked, and then he changes the molecular structure of the desk right here and turns it into a tree, which totally freaks out the teacher. And he also shows that he can disappear. And poor Uncle Martin gets one of his antennas broken right here. It's also weird to see that in this episode, the police come and raid Uncle Martin and Tim's apartment, and we see that they've actually discovered his spaceship in the garage as well. It's also cool in this scene that Lieutenant Brennan and Mrs. Brown get to see Uncle Martin with his antennas up in Andromeda, and now they know that they're both Martians. So the whole thing has kind of been blown up now. Everybody's exposed, and you're kind of wondering how they're going to, resolve this issue. But you'll notice that Uncle Martin has got his infamous time machine, and he's going to reverse time and put him back in time to the point before all of this happened and hopefully correct this big mess. And Tim makes a comment in this scene that's just as meaningful now as it was then, and maybe even more meaningful now.
Well, they've probably come down here to take over our world.
In the state it's in, who'd want it?
At the end of the episode here, all is well and good because the time machine, they went back in time and got everything back to normal. Now, in that interview with Wayne Stam, he talked about how he really regretted this scene because as he's walking out, he's supposed to go down these stairs. Now, as I mentioned in a previous episode, there were no stairs there. It's just a flat stage floor. And so you rarely saw anybody actually go down the stairs. But if they did, they were supposed to be instructed to walk down the stairs like a pantomime artist. You know how they'll act like they're going downstairs? Well, Wayne Stam, you can see he tried to do it, but he ends up just bending over, and Wayne Stam said that he really regretted that he didn't do this scene better. So here, just keep an eye on him as he walks around behind that wall, and he'll just kind of bend down. Right there. This episode reminds me very much of the last episode of I Dream of Jeannie. So I did a whole series on that show, but the very last episode of Jeannie, they expose Jeannie, and Dr. Bellows finds out about Jeannie, and you finally get to see what it's like when Dr. Bellows finds out about her. Well, this episode is kind of similar. Brennan and the whole world find out that Uncle Martin's a Martian and everything else, and they all get exposed, and then they find a way to get out of it by using the time machine. Just like on I Dream of Jeannie, the whole thing turned out to be a dream. But it is sad that this would be the last episode, and it's too bad that we didn't get to see what would have happened with the Andromeda character. Clearly, they had expected to make Wayne Stam a regular cast member for this show for season 4, but I guess sadly we never got to see how that would turn out. This episode is called Virus M for Martian. Now, at the very end of the episode, we see Brennan walking into the apartment right here, and he's got nothing in his hands. You can see he's not carrying anything, no books or anything like that. During this scene, Detective Brennan gets that virus, that Martian virus that makes the stripes on his face. But now, right here, they'll switch over to Uncle Martin and Tim. Now, watch down here in this corner, if you can see the pointer right here. Watch down here, and I'll try to pause it, and you'll briefly see this book. See that little book right there? It's like a two-binder book or some kind of flat thing right there. And here I paused it so we can see it better. So Brennan wasn't carrying anything, so what the heck is that right there? The only thing I can think of is when they were filming this close-up, they're actually talking to maybe the script supervisor who's doing the lines, who's delivering the lines to them, and then Alan Hewitt wasn't actually right there to do it. It looks like a script or something like that. It's very interesting and obviously not supposed to be there. This episode is called Martin Meets His Match. Now, in this scene coming up here, I'll go ahead and advance it. We see Uncle Martin and Tim, but if you look down on the very corner right here, see this gentleman right here? That's the guy that operates Uncle Martin's antennas. And once again, like in that other episode, we somehow get to see him. So Martin does this little part right here, and then you can see that when he disappears, so does the guy that was operating his antennas. It's pretty funny. I can't believe they actually got that guy's face in there again. Later on, Uncle Martin has hypnotized the guards to make them think that Tim is Lieutenant Brennan here. Now, as Lieutenant Brennan goes running into this back section here and then makes a left over here, look at this background. Now, this is obviously a painted background, but you'll actually be able to see Alan Hewitt's shadow on here, so right there. But you can very much see his shadow right when he runs across right there. In this episode called Horse and Buggy Martin, when Uncle Martin raises his antennas invisibly, look right up here by his hat and you'll see the wire reflecting in the light. See how it's like right up here at the little corner of it? This episode is called Stop the Presses, I Want to Get Off. Now, as Mrs. Brown leaves the apartment right here, watch as she walks off. She goes off to the side, but you don't see her go around the little corner right here to go down the steps. She just goes off in this direction, which doesn't have an exit right there. Now, as Brennan leaves, we're going to see he suffers from the same problem as a lot of other actors did when they were exiting this set. Now, once again, as I mentioned, there is no steps behind there. It was just a flat stage. And so the actors were instructed to act like there were stairs back here. But now watch Alan Hewitt. He'll just bend down as well, right there. So you can see he just bends down and hides behind that little wall. There's a real lion featured in this episode. Now, Tim is trying to fight the lion with this chair. But in the close-up here, you can clearly tell that this is a fake lion right here. It's just got a little head of it. And then they're back to the real footage. Now, in this scene, we see all three of these people standing right there. But now, if you watch, there's going to be a shadow right here. And you'll see the shadow move across here, and you can tell it's a person. So that is obviously the tiger's trainer. See, you can almost tell that the person's wearing a hat. Later on, Brennan goes running back into the back area back here, and then he goes behind this gate. But if you look closely, you'll see, it's very quick, but you'll see the shadow, his shadow on this backdrop, that because it's obviously a painted backdrop. So right in this area, you could have seen his shadow right there. See how it was very brief? Now, this is some very interesting home movie footage that was filmed by Pamela Britton's daughter while they were filming the first episode, the two-parter, Go West, Young Martian. Now, it's very interesting. I've been saying all through this series that I really wish I could see what the device was that operated Uncle Martin's antennas. And here, if you look right here, see this gentleman? He is actually holding the antennas. See that little kind of curved little pole? So here's the antennas right up there. You can kind of see the silver part of them. But see how there's this kind of black rod that comes down and it's kind of curved? So that curve, this would be behind Ray Walston's back, and then it would curve back behind his skull, his head, and then that's where the antennas would come out. Now this gentleman, I'll try to do this in slow motion here. you'll see that he's getting ready to walk over to the left because they're filming this scene, and this is where Uncle Martin, dressed as that chief, he'll come over. Now see how this guy is going to be following. You can see the antennas right there. You can see him coming over there. And now if you watch right here, now he puts the antennas up. You can see the antennas going up behind Ray Walston's head. He's the one that's wearing that mask. Now see how the antennas go up? So they're getting ready to have him appear. So the guy is behind Ray Walston, and he's getting ready to have those antennas appear. And you can even see him kind of jiggling right there. But it is so cool that you can see that device. So let me zoom in on it. So now here we can get a closer look at it. So you can clearly see the black part of it. I wish we could see what the rest of it looks like right down here, because that's the electronics part of it. That's probably the little motor for it down in that area right there. But you can see the black curved rod right there and the antennas up here. So he's getting ready to walk over with Ray. So there's Ray. He's walking in front of him in that costume. And then he's got to follow along. There might be somebody else with that guy. And I'm thinking there was only one guy. I think I saw in an interview somewhere that whoever the guy was that operated the antennas, he was very cautious in particular about only him doing it. And here we can see Ray, and we'll see the antennas kind of pop up behind his head as they're getting ready for the shot here. Try to speed it up just a little bit. There you go. See the antenna popping up? If I can get my pointer in here right there. You can kind of see it wiggling around as they're getting ready to have Ray Walston appear. So they're kind of doing the freeze. The other actors are doing the freeze. Okay, so I'll run this real time now. So as I mentioned in the I Dream of Jeannie videos, whenever something appears or disappears, everybody has to do a freeze. So the director will yell freeze, all the actors have to freeze, and then in this case, you'll see that all these actors here are freezing. They're not moving at all. And then Ray Walston's gonna, and then they stop filming, and then they'll bring Ray Walston in. He'll get on his mark, and then the guy with the antennas will get ready for that. And then when they're all ready, the actor will say, action. And then from there, all these actors can move again, and they'll start filming again. And then it'll look like Uncle Martin appeared and his antennas go down. There's like a jump cut. But the reason that everybody has to freeze is because from the time that he's not there and then he appears, if they move even just a little bit, you'll see the jump cut. If, like, say this guy's arm is moved over just a little bit, you'll see that. So that's why everybody's got to freeze. Okay, so let me run this so you can see the whole thing about how this scene went on. So now, see how the actors are all frozen right there? So now Ray Walston gets in place. The guy gets the antennas up there, but now there's a weird jump cut in the film right here. I guess that's just the way Pamela Britton's daughter filmed it. But that's really cool that you get to see that. That's so neat to see the behind the scenes of all of this. And this was at the MGM backlot where they had all kinds of really cool stuff. And a couple of the guys that worked on the show, there's a great commentary section on this DVD and some interviews with the editors and stuff. And they talked about how the MGM backlot was just wonderful because at Desilu, they just didn't have a whole lot of resources. But when they went to MGM for this third season, they said it was fantastic because they had a ton of resources, all those teepees, costumes, whatever they wanted, the prop house had it. And they didn't really have that at Desilu. So, and they also had more of a budget, which I think is why these episodes contained a lot more of these kinds of episodes. Because whenever there's these time-specific episodes like this, they cost a lot more money because you got to have all these extras and you got to have all these costumes and stuff. So it's really cool to see all of this. And it's nice that Pamela Britton's daughter filmed all of this. It's really cool. And this footage is kind of cool. You can see the side of the set right here. This is, the apartment set. But here you can see Ray Walston kind of just goofing around. But it's neat how you can see the side of the set there that you normally would never be able to see. It's too bad there was no sound for this. It's probably Super 8 film. I remember my dad had a Super 8 projector and it didn't have any film either. But we have all kinds of family movies with this. And that's the backdrop back there. And then they were just doing some color tests with this. So I don't think it was actually a part of a scene. Maybe it was. But they were just doing this for color tests. And here's Ray Walston riding around on a bike. They said that Ray Walston was very sun sensitive. That's why he would always wear these big hats and dark glasses in the sun. His eyes were really sensitive to the sun, and it's it's cool to see him kind of riding around. These are a lot of the extras, and a lot of cool stuff going on. It's really neat. I'm glad that people were doing this, and I'm glad that the producers or whoever allowed them to film all this. It was very interesting. Here they are filming where that riverboat is. That riverboat was used in a Showboat, I think the movie called Showboat. They said that it actually moved along on tracks under the water so that the boat would actually move, but it wasn't actually like a real boat. It moved around on tracks. So it's kind of cool that they used it for this episode. And that group of people that you saw earlier, they were a tour group. They actually had tour groups back in the day that would be able to watch them do the filming. And I'm always amazed. Look at how many people it takes to make a TV show. I mean, you always think of the actors. And there's Alan Hewitt right there. He's looking at the script. They said he was a very quiet guy in real life. He was actually a pretty quiet person. And then we see Bill Bixby with his camera. They said he was always taking photos. And there's the tour group right there. I bet it would have been fun to be standing there watching them do that. It's really neat. And that's the chow line, the craft services where they feed everybody. That's always kind of a big part of these productions is the food. And there's Ray. Very cool footage. I love it. And they said one of the guys on the vocal parts of this footage said that that Bill Bixby was really good with being on horses. This is the episode from season 2 that had the real lion in the scene, and they said that Ray Walston absolutely refused to work with this lion because there was an incident involving a chimpanzee. It was something happened where the chimpanzee pretty much attacked Ray Walston, and he suffered some injuries from it. I don't remember a chimpanzee being in any of the episodes. So it's very interesting to hear about that. So I bet that was scary. I think he was actually out for like a week to recover from some of his injuries. And then there's the scene with Bill Bixby, and they told him not to run from this lion, but I guess when the lion let out a roar, uh, he tore out of there. And in the episode, the lion actually goes the other way, the other direction. But yeah, I've heard that you should never run from a lion because they'll lunge at you. So I bet that was pretty scary working with him. Here's the scene where Brennan opens the door, and he couldn't get the door open at first, and they actually had to do. I think they had to reset all those nuts twice in that closet for whatever reason. Some really cool behind the scenes stuff going on here. Pamela Britton looks like she was super nice in real life. You could just tell. It was just kind of her nature. And that was the last episode that aired. Oh, it was one of the last episodes that aired. The one where the guy on the right was actually a squirrel and got turned into a human being. And this was just rehearsal where they were doing the singing routine. It's very cool. Now this footage is from Billy Blackburn. I mentioned him from the season 1 video when I did the season 1 bloopers, and he took all kinds of great home movies as well. Billy Blackburn was Ray Walston's stand-in, but he also worked as an extra. This is great. Look at this. Oh man, Bill Bixby clowning around. This was Pamela Britton's stand-in. I can't remember the name of this lady. But it's great. It looks like they had so much fun doing the show. I mean, that's what you want to see, people having a good time doing this kind of stuff. I mean, I bet it's a fun business to be in, but it's also a rough business to be in, especially a weekly show like this because it's a grind. It's oh, there's Ray being a little naughty right there. There he is with that hat again. But yeah, and My Favorite Martian, they had a lot of episodes. I believe season 1 had 36 episodes. Season 2, I believe, had 38. And season 3 only had 32. But still, that is a lot of episodes per season. I mean, nowadays, most shows they have like 10 or 15 episodes, and that's it. And so these guys were working hard doing these shows back to back. It had to be just an absolute grind. to do it, and I bet it was hard sometimes to keep their sanity. But at the same time, it's good to see that they were actually having a lot of fun. There's Pamela Britton. I mean, see how I bet she was just an absolute joy to be around. She looks like she was a lot of. My Favorite Martian was supposed to come back for a fourth season, but unfortunately, contract negotiations stalled out for Ray Walston. And by the time it looked like he was going to actually come back to do a fourth season, Jack Chertok, the producer, had moved on to another project and kind of didn't really care about My Favorite Martian anymore. So the show never got picked up, they just never went on with a fourth season. It looked like that Andromeda, the character of Andromeda, played by Wayne Stam, was going to become a regular recurring character, but unfortunately, we never got to see what would happen with that. But Ray Walston, I think he was really glad to be done with the show. I think he didn't really enjoy doing this show all that much, and it kind of typecast him after that. But he eventually did find more fame and more work doing the show Picket Fences, where he played a judge in that show. He also played Mr. Hand in the Fast Times at Ridgemont High movie and the TV show as well. And then he also was a recurring character on Star Trek as Boothby, the very wise groundskeeper. Sadly, Ray Walston passed away in 2001, January 1st of 2001, from lupus at the age of 86. Bill Bixby went on to have a very successful career after My Favorite Martian. He did a ton of different TV shows and other projects, movies. Best known for The Incredible Hulk, which I absolutely loved that show. Watched the entire series. He also did The Courtship of Eddie's Father, which was another great show. He went on to do directing and producing. He worked a lot behind the camera. He worked as a director on 30 episodes of Blossom, and he had a very good career, actually. But sadly, he died very young at the age of 59 from prostate cancer back in 1993. Pamela Britton definitely was best known for playing Mrs. Brown on My Favorite Martian, but she was also on the TV version of Blondie as well. She was on a bunch of other TV shows and movies. I used to see her pop up here and there on different shows and movies I'd watch. Sadly, Pamela Britton was another one that died at a very young age. She only lived to be 51 years old. She died of brain cancer back in 1974. Alan Hewitt had a vast career as well. He did a lot of TV shows, movies. He also did Broadway. He was on I Dream of Jeannie, Bewitched, Lost in Space. So he was on just a ton of shows. He also did a lot of voice work for commercials and probably cartoons as well. I think he had a pretty good career doing that. But sadly, Alan Hewitt passed away at the age of 71 from cancer back in 1986. So there you have it, season 3 of My Favorite Martian. Sadly, the last season of the show. But this has been really fun watching this show all over again. I haven't seen the show in quite a while, and it's made me appreciate the show all over again. And even though I sit here and point out all the bloopers, I really do appreciate all the work that went into a show like this when they had to do all these special effects practically and not using computers and CGI and all that stuff, because that took a lot of work. And for a show like this that had so many episodes per season, that couldn't have been easy to pull off. But a lot of these shows that involved a lot of special effects and magic and stuff like that, yeah, there was a lot of work into these shows. But I think it's great to revisit a show like this, and I hope that you've enjoyed this whole series. And if you did, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. I very much appreciate it. So I hope you've enjoyed this series, and in the meantime, I'll see you on the next video. So thank you very much for watching, and have a good one.